right, tonight's Wednesday, November 23rd, 2021. This is the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. Tonight's Week 12 NFL Fantasy Preview with some surprises. NFL surprises.
The sound of endless love growing inside infinity of island universes, allowing all causality to dream.
Cheers.
So it is the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. I am Jason, joined virtually this week, as always, by Dave. Dave, good to be here with you.
I am here, and yeah, Dave and Jason from drinkfive.com bringing you the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. And what do we have in store for us today? A lot of good topics, I presume.
Yeah, we'll talk about some news around the NFL. We've got some surprises and disappointments of week 11, and then because it's Tuesday and tonight is waiver night, as is tradition, we'll talk about some waiver pickups courtesy of our good friend Jim Hutchins, who writes the waiver column every week on drinkfive.com. Make sure you go to drinkfive.com on a regular basis to get waiver pickups, to get rookie advice, to get your rankings, Dave, to read about a bunch of meaningless statistics that I like to jabber on about on Mondays. There's all kinds of good stuff. There's confidence picks. Lots of fun stuff to be had at drinkfive.com. So make sure you're going there on a few times a week. That'd be nice.
Yeah, and as I've said before, the statistically insignificant column that Jason writes may contain some insignificant statistics, at least when you're glancing at it at a overhead view, right? But a lot of those they turn into discussions and a lot of fantasy relevant talk from those stats. So just because someone had 7 targets and 0 receptions doesn't, and that's something that hasn't happened before for a tight end. I think that's right with Mike Gesicki, right?
That was Mike Gesicki 2 weeks ago, yeah.
It also is sort of a portent into other things going on with the team, maybe, or is this the start of some kind of downward spiral with the passing offense? And maybe it was.
Yeah, I basically try to find fun stats, maybe stuff that is a good discussion at the water cooler. Look for the fantasy slant at it, and then just maybe there's a lot of relevant information in there. Maybe it's just fun. I remember one year I just wrote a bunch of stuff because Le'Veon Bell had an amazing day, so I did 5 different stats on him.
Yeah.
So it's just a fun read, light reading. It's not an in-depth, crazy information dump that's going to totally bring you to another level of knowledge like the rookie report.
And that usually comes out on Mondays, so light reading Monday. And
you got to do your homework on Thursday when the rookie report comes out.
Do you have any any tokens of knowledge or things of interest from your column that you just wrote yesterday?
From this week? Sure. So what I really had fun with this week was that the Patriots defense scored 14 points in the last 12 minutes of their game.
Yeah, that was
4
fun.
Interceptions and a touchdown. Doesn't even include the 10 points they got for giving the shutout. And then Jalen Hurts is the number 1 fantasy player in all of fantasy football as of this moment, with 253 points this year. Derrick Henry is still the RB3 on the year, even though he hasn't played for 3 weeks. And Rondale Moore had 11 receptions, 11 catches, and 51 yards.
So there you go. That's pretty interesting stuff that maybe in and of themselves don't necessarily mean anything to your fantasy team, but we can tell a lot of things. We can analyze that and build it into some prognostications about other people on the depth chart from those squads. So a very valuable piece of information, I think.
So what are you drinking over there, Dave? I see a freedom of speech, and what's next to it?
Well, a lot of these are part of a jumble of beers that we put into an empty 12-pack and then spilled on a driveway. So I needed to drink them before they just blew up in my refrigerator. But I have a Mosaic single hop hazy IPA from Sweetwater from Georgia, and a Freedom of Speech Session Sour Ale from Revolution Chicago, and then another Sweetwater beer, just a regular IPA, since we were down there recently, and we grabbed some of the beers that they have available. Now, Sweetwater, I think, is also available nationwide. They have a pretty large distribution network, but when in Rome, right?
Yeah, that Sweetwater case definitely took a beating as we were trying to leave Georgia.
Yeah.
But I will cheers you. I've got, a beverage with a little bit of alcohol in it.
There you go. Cheers to you.
As is the tradition. So make sure that when you guys listen to the podcast, if you're listening live, then go in the chat room, say hi, ask us some questions. If you're listening to it after the fact, remember we always do it live, generally speaking on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock Central. If there's something going on that week, like this week is Thanksgiving, so obviously schedules are a little turned around. We're going to do it on maybe a Tuesday. So what you do is you follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube. That way you'll know every time that we're going to go live to do a show.
That's right, Jay. But let's move on to some around the NFL news. And I see one big piece of news that I also have linked to something later about a possible pickup, someone who performed well last week. But that is that Adrian Peterson from the Titans was waived from the team officially. So he got in, was able to score a touchdown and get a couple carries. But now he's unceremoniously back to free agent lifestyle. Yeah,
he really, didn't do a whole lot this year. 3.0 yards per carry. 82 yards on 27 carries, played in 3 games. Really not anything that they need in Tennessee. He's not going to be the future anywhere. What they need is to make it to a point where they're still alive and can get Derrick Henry back.
Yeah, and I don't think we expected him to do all that well, and a lot of people were out there just kind of throwing their FAAB, the money that they had for this year, into the dumpster and lighting it on fire. Whenever you're grabbing a guy off the wire who's an aging running back, you can't really expect all that much from them. And right now, the Titans are in the midst of this running back carousel that is just desperately trying to find some footing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't expect a lot from Peterson. I probably put in some token claims on him. I don't think I got him anywhere. And, he was a lot of fun to watch when he was around, but he's done, and it's probably time for him to retire.
Mm-hmm.
So Zach Wilson will be starting in Week 12. He is healthy. That's one of the reasons why he's starting. Also, Joe Flacco and Mike White have been put on the COVID list. So we're sort of, or rather, let's say the Jets are off the hook with having to make a decision between Mike White and Zach Wilson right now. So we don't know who they would have chosen because they don't have to make a decision yet. I don't think that this is going to do a lot for any of the Jets players. I know that the running back is out. Help me out.
Michael Carter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's going to be out for a week or two at least.
Yeah, and he's been great, but obviously there's some stuff going around that organization. I will say, though, from an NFL perspective, from a football fan's perspective, when you're the Jets, it doesn't really matter what your record is this year. You kind of have to give Zach Wilson a little bit more room and see what it is that he can do this year. That's the whole point of this year, right? They were never going to make the playoffs and make a playoff push. So they really just need to explore what he can do for them. But, like you said, saves them a decision anyway because there's no other quarterback on that squad that is able to play. So, Zach Wilson, here you go again.
Yeah, hopefully he can keep Elijah Moore going. Moore has probably been the best performing rookie on that team this year. The best fantasy player, too.
Yeah, Moore and Carter have both been good, and Carter's come on later in the season. We talked about him earlier in the season about scoring a touchdown, and he hadn't had one yet, and now he's a viable fantasy player when he's able to play, of course. But we talked about Elijah Moore preseason. He was one of those darling rookies that you would pick up in the late rounds of a draft. But then, of course, it happens a lot, and it's no different this year. They don't often come on right away, right? So Elijah Moore didn't come on until later in the season. And by that time, if you had him on your bench, you were already past him and had cut him weeks ago to pick up the flavor of the week. So I guess it's a lesson to you, right? If there are guys that are kind of diamonds in the rough, as it were. Maybe they're not the best guys to pick up at the end of a draft because they almost always take 4, 5, 6 weeks to get going.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you can get them on the free agent, list at some point because people will pick them up early. They won't perform and they'll drop them.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if someone had Elijah Moore on their roster that was not in a deep league and they had him earlier in the year as a sleeper, they're just not paying that much attention to their roster. So
yeah,
you could say congratulations to you, but you're probably 2 and
stumbled into it instead of earning it.
Yeah, you're probably 3-8 at the moment. So enjoy playing Elijah Moore.
So Jason Garrett has been fired as the offensive coordinator of the New York Football Giants. So I saw a stat during the game last night that the Giants have not scored 30 points in like 25 straight games. So I know that holds true for this entire season. They've scored 17, 23, and 10 points over the last 3 weeks. Daniel Jones not doing a whole lot fantasy-wise. You're not getting a lot of production out of any of the other positions. Davonte Booker was a nice fill-in for you, but now that Saquon Barkley is back, obviously you didn't expect a lot to come from the running back position against the Buccaneers. But what I'm most interested in is what's going to happen at wide receiver for the Giants. So we saw Kadarius Toney had double-digit targets, right? 12 targets, but only 7 catches for 40 yards. As long as he can keep getting big targets like that, then I'm fine, and I want to keep him around, and I will throw him in the lineup if need be. But do you see like a Darius Slayton with 7 targets? Do you see that happening again, or is that sort of a fluke?
Daniel Jones hasn't been throwing the ball very accurately from me just watching those Giant games. There were tons of passes that went over people's heads, etc. Darius Slayton doing well is not a fluke. I mean, we saw him do well in a previous year with the Giants. I think the biggest problem with that offense right now is really that they had Kenny Gallaudet and wrapped him up with so much money, but he's still not performing even though he was out there playing just this last Monday. I thought that Toney and Slayton were getting the majority of the looks, and I think that's what you'll continue to see. I think they overspent on Gallaudet. I think they're trying to game plan for him, and so that's part of the problem with Toney is that Galladay's getting some first look plays set up, but he can't get separation. And so it looks to me like those are going to be the 2 guys that are successful going forward. And Sterling Shepard is an amazing possession receiver on that team. He has always outperformed expectations, but he's been injured most of this year. So the problem really begins if Shepard is healthy along with Slayton and Toney. Then it feels like every game is just 2 of those 3 guys, and Gallaudet is a constant threat to take the first look away from any of them. So it's a big problem if you're starting Giants receivers. But I will tell you this: I think Toney will have 8+ targets in every game for the rest of the season, and I think they have to give them to him. And I think the fans are going to clamor for that. I think the organization wants that. And even though he started off as a hot-tempered rookie, he might still be, but he is the best playmaker on that football team besides Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Kenny Gallaudet, as much as they want to make something out of him, if they're only going to throw it to him twice in a game, then he's going to quickly become an afterthought in that offense.
Yeah,
and you'll see a guy like I don't know, like Slayton, I suppose, if Shepard's not around, But I think Shepard practiced last week, was still inactive, so he could definitely be back this week, provided he gets practices in.
Yeah, it's just rough because they have a lot of receivers, and none of them are as explosive as Toney, but Toney's a rookie. Now with the coach being fired or the offensive coordinator being fired, we're not exactly sure. There's a little bit of confusion. But it would be very silly for a new OC, whoever it is it someone in the organization right now that's filling in?
I don't think that they would go outside for an OC in the middle of the year. I've never heard of that, really. So, yeah, it'll probably be one of the positional coaches getting bumped up. Maybe there was an assistant offensive coordinator. I would imagine that today they just haven't announced it yet.
So whoever's filling in is going to continue to give Toney looks because that's the person who is making the plays. And
they did say it's going to be Freddie Kitchens.
Oh yeah, I did. I saw
who ran the offense in Cleveland. So good luck there, New York.
Well, a couple of these organizations need more than luck, but yeah, to your original point, I think Tony is still going to be a good play, but he's on such an unpredictable team as far as their offensive prowess from game to game.
So speaking of coaches getting fired, the rumors swirled today, and it was definitely a hot conversation topic among our friends group because we're here in Chicago, that Matt Nagy will be getting fired soon. In fact, I believe the rumor was that Matt Nagy was told that he will be fired after Thursday's game, which is just an absurd rumor in and of itself. Like, hey, you have to work for the rest of the week, but you're going to be fired at the end of the week. Like, that doesn't happen in any job. So I don't think that that's what actually happened. But clearly something leaked somewhere to the level that someone believed it enough to, report it. So we'll see what happens there. And Nagy, of course, denied it and said that everything's fine. But on the field for the Bears, Justin Fields was injured. He had a rib injury. He didn't finish the game this week against the Ravens. And Andy Dalton finished the game. Andy Dalton's going to start on Thursday against the Lions as well. It's the quickest turnaround of the NFL season, where you play on Sunday at noon, and then you have to play again on Thursday at 11:30 a.m. So, thanks NFL for that, for giving us the Bears and the Lions just enough to work up an appetite.
The Lions are going to win this game, this Thanksgiving game. It's going to happen.
They have to win eventually. They're not going to go. I guess. It would be funny if they go 0-16 again.
0-16-1, yeah.
0-16-1, but 0-16.
Yep. So with him possibly being fired, which I still think could happen, regardless of all of this rumor swirling stuff, I think it's not really going to impact much on that organization as far as fantasy production, right?
I agree.
It's not really something that's a lot for us to worry about until probably next year. If there is a new coach, then they'll probably try to reorganize the playmakers a little bit. But
they might want to figure out how to use a guy like Allan Robinson, for example.
Well, I already hear most of the rumor mill saying things like, we're going to go get Michael Gallup, or we're going to go get such and such for this next year, because everyone already sees A-Rob out the door. If they're not even trying to develop chemistry with who has proved to be one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL, then what are they doing over there?
I'd love Allan Robinson to go ahead and find himself a competent quarterback. I mean, it'd be great if he landed with a good one, but just a competent one is a step up from his entire career.
He's always had shitty quarterbacks. It's true.
Yeah.
Taysom Hill signed a huge contract extension. Did you see this, Jason?
I thought this happened last year.
No.
Did he sign another one?
No, it just happened.
He
So
got a contract last year that was weird.
Well, I don't know what it was last year, but he just signed a 4-year contract extension that'll be between $40 and $95 million, depending on bonuses and what position he plays. If he ends up being a starting quarterback for the team, he can earn up to $95 million. But if he ends up being more of a gadget player or a tight end or a backup quarterback or whatever it is that Peyton wants to put him out into, then he can make up to, between 40 and 95, depending on all the craziness that they wrote into the contract. I would love to see the contract. I don't know that stuff is public to view unless somebody makes it so, because it's not a public company.
Some of it winds up being public because the agents like to show their work,
Yeah.
advertisement for future clients. But yeah, he had signed a 1-year, $10 million contract. That was the one he was working on this year. Okay,
well, clearly Peyton loves Hill, and what I'm interested in the most is from a fantasy perspective. Also notable that their tight end is now out for 4 to 6 weeks, and I think that just happened today as well. They announced that, and so if that's the case, do you think they'll start using Taysom Hill as a tight end? Do you think they'll bring him in more often as a quarterback? I mean, I wouldn't put anything past Peyton, and the fact that he made this contract with Hill lets me know that maybe they are considering using Taysom as the starting quarterback, and it's just that his injuries that led up to this and all the craziness with Jameis Winston himself getting injured, they were unable to let Hill fill that position right away. So I still think that the money talks, and that this says that Hill is going to have a role on that offense that may or may not be fantasy productive. And what do you think about it?
So, I mean, over the last few weeks, without Jameis Winston, they've had plenty of opportunities to go ahead and use Hill on a regular basis. I think that Hill is never going to be the starting quarterback as we know it. He may be a guy who plays, a good percentage of snaps eventually, but he's not.
Well, remember last year when he was a starter for a couple of weeks, he ended up putting up 20-plus points each game, if I remember correctly. So there's that kind of nagging feeling in the back of your mind about, like, well, if it happens, then it means he's automatically a QB1 borderline.
Yeah, but they're not even starting him over Travis Simeon right now.
Oh, I'm aware, but the Saints are the Saints are in trouble in general.
Are they purposely tanking at that point? I don't know.
Mm.
But I mean, Taysom Hill only has 8 passing attempts this year, and this is a year where they've had Jameis Winston, and then Jameis Winston went out, and they've had Trevor Simeon. So if they're serious about giving this guy $100 million to be a quarterback, you would think that they would want him to throw the ball more.
Well, all I know is that that's what the money is above the dotted line. That's all we know.
Hey, I mean, good on him. His peak of the year for offensive snaps, 53% in week 3, 50% in week 4. Didn't even play weeks 6 through 8. I don't remember if he was injured or not, but I suspect he just didn't get in one of those games. So, Sean Payton knows what he's doing because he's a great head coach.
Well, maybe it's a next year.
See what happens.
Maybe it's a next season thing, and they're just developing, an idea or a plan for next season. But clearly, signing for 4 years for up to $95 million means you're going to use the guy. I mean, even the highest paid backups in the league aren't making that kind of scratch.
I agree totally, and I'm interested to see what they want to do with him. But I thought that last year when they gave him a $10 million contract, that they'd do something interesting with him.
Well, they
haven't this year.
There's one other possibility, and I like this rumor personally, and that is that Sean Payton is actually Taysom Hill's father, and and his illegitimate son Taysom Hill. He's just trying to get him that nest egg and everything that's necessary for him to move up in the world.
This is just some kind of crazy money laundering scheme or something like that.
That's right.
Oh, that's fun.
So we'll see, but for right now, I think we both agree that Taysom Hill doesn't belong on a redraft team, but it's still, because of this amount of money, it would not surprise me, Jason, if Hill ended up being the quarterback in 2 weeks from now. We could see Taysom Hill in fantasy football championships just kind of tearing up the ideas that we just put out.
Sure.
And then Dontrell Hilliard, are you familiar with him?
Yeah, the Titans running back.
Yeah, so
he's about as familiar as I get.
Well, he's been on some other squads. He was on the Houston Texans previously. He was just signed to the Titans active roster as they continue to search for a solid running back. We talked about this search earlier. Week 11's game stats, when he was in there, he had 35 yards on 7 carries and caught 8 of 10 targets for 47 yards. So the important thing to note here is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that McNichols ended up going out of the game with some kind of injury or concussion, and that is the reason why there were so many targets given to Hilliard. But because he was so successful with those targets and he wasn't horrible with the carries that I saw either, there is the possibility that between him and Foreman, they're able to develop some kind of a reasonable running game. And the Titans right now are losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to. That's because they are completely thrown off balance with Derrick Henry out and his immediate backup, Darrington Evans, out. So these guys up until now have not been able to fill the void. Hilliard is definitely a possible waiver wire pickup you're going to see go in a lot of your leagues. Now, as to whether or not he's any more valuable than Adrian Peterson, nobody's guess. But in PPR leagues, I can say that catching 8 of 10 targets is certainly a valuable thing that he did last week.
Yeah, so Hilliard was in on 63% of offensive snaps last week. That's great if you're going to be in any sort of timeshare. And I think that's what we're going to see from the Titans, is that no one player is going to replace the load that Derrick Henry was carrying.
Yeah.
I mean, from a logical perspective, that's going to be true. But just from like when you drill down into the macro, it's definitely, there's not. They're going to have to go with a timeshare here. You're going to see McNichols when he's healthy. He didn't play last week because of a concussion. You're going to see Deonta Foreman a little bit. It's going to be a little bit of everybody, and that's all you're going to get until Derrick Henry comes back. So personally, I don't really like any of this for fantasy value. Of course, in a full PPR, Dontrell Hilliard, if he's going to see 10 targets a game, then give it to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an important discussion to have, especially for those deeper leagues that have deep benches or that play a lot of roster positions or multiple flexes. Because at this time of the year, as you know, not only the bye weeks are affecting you, but also the injuries and also COVID and also depth chart changes. And so that's a lot of stuff to deal with. Now, I don't want to start a Hilliard or a Foreman, but
neither do I.
They certainly seem like the guys that could be successful there. But in the reality of things, I think we both realize that there is no one there that's going to do anything substantial value until Derrick Henry is able to come back. And that might happen sooner than people think at this point. So,
really, I mean, do you expect him back before week 17?
Well, for fantasy purposes, no, I don't.
I still think he's completely irrelevant for fantasy purposes.
Well, if 17 is a championship week, we could see some Derrick Henrys out there. But
oh man, talk about desperation championship games. But I've done crazier in a Superflex league once I started Kellen Moore in week 16.
Kellen Moore, yeah, very nice.
Won that sucker too.
Well, let's take a small break and then move on to our next segment.
I'll have a little drink.
Cheers.
Is this a new song, Dave?
Just the Bones.
Oh. I like to hear them in progress.
So yeah, let's run right into our next category. If you are interested in starting this one up, I know you have a couple things at least that are first on our notes here. So
we'll get into some surprises and disappointments. So following up on the team we were just talking about, the Titans lost to the Texans. This game was in Tennessee. It was a rainy mess, but that's the kind of game that you expect the Titans to win because they're supposed to be playing good defense with a good running game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happened. Ryan Tannehill had 4 interceptions. It was the most of his career. Yet somehow the Titans are still the number 1 seed at 8-3 in the AFC. So the Colts are now breathing down their neck because the Colts are playing very well. They've lost a couple of really close games. Otherwise, it would be much closer. So I say breathing down their neck. There's probably a 2-game lead at least in the division, I would imagine. I don't have the records in front of me. But what we're really worried about is what fantasy value is left in Tennessee. We've had several disappointing weeks in a row out of A.J. Brown. There isn't really another pass catcher on the team that you can rely on. Ryan Tannehill has not really gone very high this year, although I have noticed now he probably has the highest floor of any quarterback in the league this year because he hasn't dipped below, I think, 11 or 12 points all year.
Jalen Hurts is the highest floor, I think, with maybe 16 is his lowest, something like that.
Jalen Hurts finally had like a 7-point game, I think, last week or the week before. But it was definitely Jalen Hurts for a while because Hurts didn't dip below 20 points for a while.
You're right, less than 16. Yeah, I have those notes here later in the show too. So
Ryan Tannehill is at least 13 points in every single game, which is great if you're in a superflex league because you just want to throw him in there.
Nah.
As for a quarterback one, he hasn't topped 23.48 points all year. So that's not the kind of ceiling that you're hoping for. So what fantasy value is there really to be had on this team?
I'm not sure 13 is good for a superflex either, to be honest.
No, it's not what you want, but if it's the minimum, you can live with it.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed watching Tannehill over his career, and I've seen in various spots that there seem to be issues with the teams that he's on as far as the talent or the scheme, especially with the Dolphins when they didn't like him anymore. It's not that he was a bad quarterback. It's that they didn't really do anything with the ball offensively. They didn't have a unique offensive scheme. They didn't do anything that was out of the box. I feel like Tennessee has simply gotten themselves lost in what Derrick Henry was able to bring them. So, to your point, I don't think there is much value except that A.J. Brown is a fantastic receiver, and I certainly think that the team, or at least A.J. Brown, will bounce back from this low fantasy production. But something has to be changed, and it seems like the offensive coordinator, the way that they're calling the plays, the way that the team is performing, is still pretending that Derrick Henry is on the team.
That's a good way to put it. And yeah, I've been really disappointed with A.J. Brown. Over the last 3 weeks, he has 11 catches with 24 targets and only 106 yards. No touchdowns. And this week, they play New England in New England. Bill Belichick is great at taking away the best weapon of the team. The only weapon of the team right now is A.J. Brown. So, A.J. Brown, I suspect you want to sit him this week. If you've got him, it's a tough decision, but I think you got to sit him this week. And then you got to buy, so you're not getting a lot out of him until the playoffs start in week 14. Or I guess it's the last week of the regular season now. But
yeah, he's one of those players that that could, because of circumstances, right, end up being someone that you're not playing at this point in the season. But then in the fantasy championships, maybe something, or not the championships, but the playoffs, something changes, and he's able to pull off more production. But he's such a good receiver that I can't imagine that they're just unable to get good production out of A.J. Brown for the rest of the season. That doesn't make sense.
I agree, and the fact that his targets have remained high is encouraging.
Yeah,
they're clearly not looking elsewhere. They don't have anywhere else to look.
But in general, very disappointing, as you mentioned, and we have Anthony Fercer, who's the tight end there, filling in after Jonnu Smith left for the Patriots. And although a lot of people preseason thought that he could be someone to really target as a top 10 or 15 tight end, he hasn't done much of anything. I just don't know if the blame is on Tannehill or if it's on the people calling the plays, or if it's on I don't know, the offensive line. I'm not sure. But I haven't been watching the Titans games as much as I have some other games, because I'll tell you a secret: they are really boring because they have no offensive standout players any longer.
I agree.
Yeah.
So the answer to my question, what fantasy value is left in Tennessee, is shockingly little for the next 2 weeks at least.
Yeah, that seems accurate.
For the number one seed in the AFC, it's surprising for that to be the case. So Jonathan Taylor is the running back one this year. He scored 5 touchdowns this week. It was the 11th best fantasy performance, I believe, in the last 20 years or so. I actually just watched a buddy of ours sent me a link earlier tonight of a game where the Seattle Seahawks scored 4 touchdowns in 3 minutes in a game in 2002. Sean Alexander had 54 points in that game. He had all 5 of his touchdowns in the first half.
Wow.
So anyways, that was an amazing performance by Taylor. Back to 2021. So who else on the Colts is going to be fantasy relevant in order to bring you success in the fantasy playoffs? Do you like Michael Pittman a lot going forward? Or do you think that it's like the Jonathan Taylor show and, that's kind of it?
No, I think Michael Pittman didn't have great points this week, but if you look at all the other weeks and you look at his success so far and the trends and trajectories that exist, Pittman's been fantastic, and I think he's clearly the number one wide receiver for the Colts going forward. So here's a guy that is going to be good for the next 3 or 4 years on that team, and should be the guy that usurps all of the targets that used to go to T.Y. Hilton. It's clear that T.Y. Hilton can't stay healthy, and when he's on the field, he's not the playmaker that he used to be. So I love Michael Pittman. I think that the combination of tight ends they have on that team, there's too many of them that could have a good game any week. I still see Mo Alley Cox or what is his face? He used to play basketball. Come on.
They don't. They only have Jack Doyle.
Yeah, Doyle. Jack Doyle.
Jack Doyle is who you're talking about.
He used to play basketball. Well, I mean, the odds are like 2-1 that a tight end on any team used to play basketball in college. But yeah, Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox are doing that thing that they used to do when Ebron was on the Colts, which is that, yeah, you might have one good game and have a touchdown and 70 yards, but then you're not going to perform for 2 more weeks, which is just inconsistent, and it's not okay for fantasy managers to roster and start that kind of a player. So I think it's pretty much just Pittman, but I have seen Zach Pascal do pretty well in addition. He's not a bad PPR flex start, but I'm not looking at his stats right now. So this is just from watching games. Every time I want to see a Pittman and it goes to Pascal, I'm like, damn, that Pascal got it again.
I tell you what, as someone who's had to start Pascal because of rough benches on my dynasty teams, they don't throw it to Pascal very often.
So I'm probably just seeing all the 4 passes that
You're
he gets.
Catching it at all the wrong times, yeah. And Pittman has had some really big games where he's getting double-digit targets, but then there's long stretches where that's just not happening.
Yeah, but this is his breakout year. I mean, it's
absolutely it is.
You don't get like a consistent every week WR1 performance unless you are AJ Brown last year on the Titans with Derrick Henry running the ball opposite you. But we could see that this year with Pittman because now we have Jonathan Taylor. So what are they discussing inside the Colts headquarters? They're discussing, well, we've seen exactly how this works in Tennessee. We've got a guy that everyone is going to be looking at now in Jonathan Taylor. So what do we do with that? Well, we exploit, the double coverage and the stacked boxes against Taylor by throwing the ball to Pittman. So I think you may
need to have a lot of play action.
Yeah.
And what we can actually find out what they're saying because they are on Hard Knocks, in-season Hard Knocks, which started up last week.
I didn't watch it yet. Did you see the first episode?
I did watch it. So there's less of the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's clear that they really didn't want to tip their hand too much on any of the actual game planning. There was one little bit that was really interesting. So what they did, they covered the game. I think it was Miami who they played. No, Jacksonville, who they played in Week 10. So one of the coaches for special teams identified like a weakness on the Jacksonville special teams, and they're bad at this, they're bad at that. We can exploit this. And during that game, Indianapolis actually had a blocked kick returned for a touchdown, and it was like literally the thing that they had pointed out. They exploited and they turned it into a huge play. So that was really cool, but like that was about as in-depth as they went as far as explaining the behind-the-scenes stuff. The rest of it was all like, Carson Wentz is about to have a baby. A bunch of other players are going to have a baby. Let's do a gender reveal party at the stadium. Like,
yeah, so drama.
A lot of fluff in the episode. I'm hoping for a little more meat on the bone as they go forward. Obviously the game highlights and stuff like that are really fun. The montages are great. I love the narrator. So I'll keep watching Hard Knocks because there's stuff to be had there. But I was disappointed that we didn't get as much behind-the-scenes stuff as you'd get during the preseason. Well,
it's in season, just like you said. So they're not going to show you much, if anything. And I guess keeping it front of scenes, is not missing the mark here for the management in the Colts headquarters. They were like, I guess we have to do this, but we don't really have to do
we don't have
much.
To actually show you anything.
Yeah. How about the Cardinals?
How about them? So Colt McCoy has been really good as a backup. Maybe quietly one of the best backup quarterbacks of the year. He's 2-1, winning 2 division games on the road. Very hard to do. They get a bye this week. There's some extra rests to be had for Kyler Murray, for DeAndre Hopkins. So Colt McCoy has won these 2 games without the use of the best offensive weapon that's not named Kyler Murray. And I think that, he deserves all of the credit in the world.
You're talking about James Conner?
The job that he's done. Well, James Conner, new offensive weapon apparently. The greatest offensive weapon, if you ask a few of our friends. And what I think you're going to see is this team really is deep, really plays very well, and they're going to be awesome when they get their 2 best weapons back. So I believe that they are the number 1 seed yet again in the NFC, and I think that everyone's gonna have a tough time knocking them off if Kyler Murray is back and playing like he was early in the year, and if DeAndre Hopkins is healthy.
Yeah, nobody's knocking off the Cardinals. In fact, I think that they're on the short list for Super Bowl contenders this year. They look great. They look like they can beat anybody any given Sunday, and those are the kinds of teams that you like to watch. So I'm looking forward to it. If Colt McCoy and James Conner and a spattering of wide receivers can basically take on anybody in the league, then Kyler Murray and D-Hop coming back can beat Tom Brady and the Bucks. They can beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. They can beat anybody.
Yeah, indeed. So we saw the Cowboys offense last week. Absolutely anemic. It was tough to watch. You know, it was like 16-6 or something going into halftime. You thought maybe they could turn it around in the second half. Nothing happened in the second half of that game. The Cowboys did not score a touchdown against the Chiefs. And up until last week, or the week before, the Chiefs' defense has been terrible this season. So they did start to turn it around. The Chiefs, you know, and that's not who I wanted to talk about here, but the Chiefs really look like they've sort of started putting things together. If their offense is more or less fixed, and if their defense is playing well, then they are going to be a really tough team in the playoffs. But for now, looking at the Cowboys, I want to know if they can be trusted this week against the Raiders. It's a very quick turnaround for them. They play on Thursday. Amari Cooper is going to be out. We already know that. CeeDee Lamb did not finish last week's game because of a concussion. Usually, concussions don't allow you to play on a following Thursday. They haven't ruled him out yet, which is kind of surprising considering it's already Tuesday night. So let's call him questionable for now. But if he does play, would you play him? If he doesn't play, would you feel comfortable with starting a Gallup? Or, you know, rolling with Schultz, even though I suppose if you've got Schultz, he's probably going to be your primary tight end anyways. And obviously Dak Prescott has been a big question mark. Since his injury, he has not really had he's had one good game, the game that they played against Atlanta. So I will phrase this in the form of an easier to digest question. Would you start CeeDee Lamb? Would you start Michael Gallup? Would you start Dak Prescott?
I like Dak Prescott turning things around. I think that is one of those things that's bound to happen. But because they have two guys on IR that are they're arguably their best pass rushers, I think they're finding it really difficult to put pressure on the opposing team's offense, and because of that, they're losing a lot of clock time, and I think that's one of the big problems here. But Michael Gallup is a good receiver, and if CeeDee Lamb is able to come back and play with Gallup, they can weather the storm of Amari Cooper not being available. I agree with you. I think it's a game that they should be able to come back and have a get-right situation with, but because of the injuries and the trajectory that they are currently on, it looks like more of a coin flip, and it's going to be a tough game to watch. It's going to be a nail-biter for any fans of those particular squads, the Raiders and the Cowboys.
Yeah, if you're a believer in the coin, then it's not looking good for the Cowboys. I don't know if you guys don't know what I'm talking about. There's a Raiders fan who flipped a coin, and he has used the coin flip to predict the winner of the Raiders game correctly every single week so far this year.
You know, everyone can hear you. Just she's.
Even if we can't see you, Jessica, we can hear you.
There's a beer just like slowly being tilted across the table. It's a.
What is that? It looks interesting.
It's an aged day-old donut from Scorched Earth, which was a good beer that they came out with probably a couple months ago now. But this one has been aged for a while. Last year, yeah, that's a couple months ago. Like a good 12.
A couple months.
Yeah. So we're gonna sample that, see what that's like. But let's move on through this stuff because we are moving at a pace that is probably more like a Adrian Peterson than a Derrick Henry pace. I am not sure about the Cowboys. I think they'll eke it out, but I don't know if I would ever want to put any money on that game.
I agree.
We talked about Jalen Hurts earlier in the podcast. Jalen Hurts impressed again last week with 30.78 fantasy points against the Saints. And just one of his 11 starts, he's had less than 16 points. Now, I think that's what you were talking about when we brought it up briefly, that he had a very low amount. But all the other starts that he's had, 8 other times this season, he's reached over 20 fantasy points. And all the other starts, he's done better. So one of the better quarterbacks to have on your fantasy roster this particular year. Even if he's not necessarily a great NFL quarterback, he is a great fantasy quarterback for your team. It was a second straight game without a touchdown for Russell Wilson. Second straight game without a touchdown. Now, we know that he doesn't play well in the second half of the season over the past couple of years. We've brought this up on numerous podcasts. When I say couple, I mean few, which is 3 or 4. That probably describes it a little bit better. And we've
using the word couple a little liberally.
Couple is
in the last few minutes.
Couple is 2, right? Yeah. Let me get back on track.
Okay.
So in a few of the past years that he's started, the second half of the season, they tend to not utilize his passing as much as they do in the beginning of the season. Of course, this year with Chris Carson out and a circus of running backs that are trying to fill in for him, much like in Tennessee, they're not having much success with that, and it's not helping Russell Wilson. What we have to ask ourselves, though, is Russell Wilson actually okay, or could this be pointing to the end of the Russell Wilson era in Seattle? Last week, he went 14 of 26 for 207 yards and 2 rushes for 2 yards. That's 8.48 points. And he put up 7.64 points in Week 10. So he's not startable in any leagues. I don't know anyone that should start him in any leagues unless you are in a league that starts 3 quarterbacks. So that's not a super flex, right?
That's brutal, Dave.
That's
absolutely brutal.
That's a tri-flex. So if you're starting Russell Wilson right now, you are just in for a world of hurt, Jason.
I know. I am in one of those leagues.
Are you starting him?
I am in a 2-quarterback league, and he is my second quarterback.
Well, you might want to think about starting a receiver or a running back or a tight end over Russell Wilson.
In Washington this week,
Washington has been beating teams they have no right beating.
They are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks. I can't sit Russell Wilson.
Well,
logic just tells me that I can't do that.
How many times did they pick off Tom Brady? 3?
Twice. So
if Tom Brady can't put up a good game against them, I don't know about Russell in his current format. But that's a question for us to talk about later. I don't feel like Russell's doing well enough to start him with any confidence whatsoever. And if you had someone that you feel could score 12 or 14 points over Russell, I would start them instead.
Yeah. Well, I probably don't have that on my bench. I'm not going to examine my fantasy team for all of our entertainment at the moment.
Well, then it's always good to start a quarterback because they have a higher potential, easier to reach.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, good luck.
It's a great point, and all that does is it trickles down through the entire team with the Seahawks, where you don't want to start Lockett, you don't want to start Metcalf, if you're not going to be starting Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
really rough. So I hopefully this is sort of a turnaround week for them instead of a sputter out of the season.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Finally, Brandon Cooks has been the bright spot on the Texans offense as far as fantasy production over most of the season, but his usage appears to be trending down with Tyrod Taylor back at the helm. That could be coincidence, but what we're seeing is last game he put up only 2 receptions for 18 yards on 2 targets in Week 11's win against the Titans. Will Cooks be able to get back on track against the Jets next week? In PPR leagues, Cook has been a great start because he has been getting 8, 9, 10 receptions per game, pumping up those numbers even if the Texans are not doing well. Now we see the Texans winning games, but Cook's not doing so well. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but it makes me hesitant to play Brandon because it feels like things are just a little bit in disarray in that organization. Do you think that the Houston Texans organization has gotten up on the right side of the bed and has everything in order?
No, I don't think they have any clue what they're doing. They, Forrest Gumped their way into a win last week, and I definitely, look, Tyrod Taylor had 14 completions for 107 yards.
Mm-hmm.
If he keeps playing like that, they're going to go back to Davis Mills because they're already they're 2-8 on the year. They're not going to go anywhere, so they might as well see what they have in Davis Mills a little bit longer. And I think if they do go back to Davis Mills, that's going to bump up the value of Brandon Cooks. I'm not overly concerned with Cooks not getting a lot of catches. They play the Jets this week, so I assume it'll be a relatively back and forth game and not a game where Houston is playing from behind the whole time. But then they play Indy, Seattle, Jacksonville, Chargers, San Francisco. So there's plenty of games in there where they're going to be down pretty quickly. They're going to need to throw the ball a lot. So Brandon Cooks' value is still going to be there. The one thing the Jets do is give up a ton of points on the ground, and because teams don't have to throw the ball that much. So maybe it's another week without a lot of Brandon Cooks production. But as soon as they play Indy and Jonathan Taylor has 3 touchdowns in the first quarter, they're going to have no choice but to throw the hell out of the ball. So
now you're expecting Jonathan Taylor to get 5 touchdowns every game. Everyone's going to be so disappointed next week when he has 105 yards and no touchdowns.
Well, yeah, he plays Tampa Bay this week. Tampa Bay, of course, I believe by far the best team against the running back.
I think Pittsburgh is number 2 or 3.
Let's see points against. Tampa has definitely fallen. They are now the 6th fewest points to opposing running backs. Indianapolis is the best team against the running back now.
That's because they have to play against him.
It's the kind of thing in fantasy football where, if you're the highest scoring team in the league, chances are that you're going to have the fewest points against just because all of those high scores are for you and not against you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
One of those things. They don't ever have to play against the best running back in the league. Therefore, they're not going to give up too many points.
Well, I want to go through these waiver wire pickups really quickly, and then we'll move on to some questions and a cut list. But we have limited time to do it in, so let's call it a waiver lightning round. I'm just going to read off some information, and then you give your outlook on that if you would. So these come from Jim Hutchins, who's a drinkfive.com contributor. He's been around for several years now working with drinkfive, and the percentage owned is based on Yahoo leagues at the time of publication, which was on Monday night. So number 5, and it's a pick 5, so 5 waiver wire picks that you might consider for this particular week. Number 5 is the Chicago Bears defense and special teams, 24% owned, so available in most leagues. The Bears get a Thanksgiving matchup against the winless Lions and a backup quarterback, Tim Boyle. Boyle looked pretty bad in his first start, throwing for only 77 yards and throwing 2 interceptions. So the Bears defense, although there are a lot of injuries on it, like any defense that it happens to be playing against a Detroit team starting Tim Boyle, is definitely a good option. But I think this game is going to be extremely unpredictable. But I do believe that Jim has a point here where there could easily be a pick 6. There will definitely be some recoveries or interceptions on both sides of the ball in this one. What do you think, Jason?
It's funny of you to think that there will be points in this game, Dave.
You think it's going to be 3-3?
Oh, man, that might be optimistic. So the Lions are giving up the 7th most points to opposing defenses.
Yeah.
Another interesting – I like where he's going with this. Using the same logic, I would also say try for the Lions defense. The Bears are giving up the 6th most points to opposing defenses.
Yep.
So this is a game where both defenses could put up a decent amount of points, just like we saw, I believe it was the Miami versus Houston game a few weeks ago.
Maybe the defenses can outscore the quarterbacks. Maybe we should put some money on that.
Oh, I think they could totally happen.
All right, number 4, Van Jefferson from the Los Angeles Rams, 46% owned. Jefferson was number 2 in targets in the Rams game that we saw previously, despite the addition of Odell Beckham. Now, Beckham was just put in to that lineup, but Van Jefferson knows all of the play calling, etc., and he's not necessarily playing the same role that Beckham will play in the offense, as that is sort of unclear. With Robert Woods now out for the season with an ACL, anybody's game. But I would suspect that Van Jefferson, because he's been a part of that offense for much longer and had more chemistry with Matt Stafford, that he will continue to see looks in the game. Jim considers him a solid bye-week WR3 fill-in for the next few weeks against the Packers, Jaguars, and Cardinals. I think that those matchups are not necessarily easy, but it might be a good thing that some of those games might end up being shootouts, because Van Jefferson is the kind of guy you want in a shootout.
Absolutely. So they have turned to Van Jefferson more lately. He has 27 targets in the last 4 weeks. In the first 6 weeks of the year, he only had 26 targets. So definitely upping his usage. That's encouraging. The next 3 matchups, none of them are particularly rough when it comes to giving up points to the opposing wide receivers. In fact, the Jacksonville matchup is pretty juicy. So I definitely like this pickup here. And it's a player that I have sort of mentioned a few times on previous shows. So I like that he's getting on board with me.
Yeah, the problem is generally with Jefferson, just that he does a little but not a lot. And
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that seems to be the problem. You're like, oh, it looks like it could be great, but then he gives you 7.5
He's
points.
getting, like a couple more opportunities per game. And, if you're going to have a deep threat guy, if they're getting 7, maybe it gets bumped up to 8 or 9 targets a game, then definitely there's enough there to start him.
Yeah, number 3, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Scantron on the Green Bay Packers. Of course, the wide receiver there that is behind Davonte Adams. And depending on the game, Alan Lazard, 9% owned. He was someone that people are always looking at because there's always that who's the number 2 behind Davonte Adams discussion. But it turns out that there is no one behind Davonte Adams. It's just an endless line of wide receivers that may or may not catch the ball. Proving that stat is the fact that his biggest game of the season, I'm talking about Valdez-Scantling, was the last week's game where he caught 4 of 10 targets. 10 targets, caught 4. Now, from Aaron Rodgers, if you're not catching 50% of those things that are thrown to you, at least there is something wrong with you as a receiver. But he got 123 yards and a touchdown, and Rodgers currently has COVID toe, so we'll see what happens with that. And it's a real thing. Look it up. And if he continues to get a high target share,
I want to look it up. I don't want to know.
Yeah, don't. And don't share it on the website or anything, I don't think.
Too much COVID shit for me.
Yeah. If he continues to get this high of a target share where he's getting 8, 9, 10 targets in a game, then of course he's playable because Rodgers is his quarterback. And any receiver that is getting the ball from Aaron Rodgers has a 63% chance of scoring a touchdown in each game, right? Obviously.
Sure.
Anyway, I think Jim is looking at this as another guy that's possible to be a boomer bust WR3 chasing the stats from last week. If you have no one else to play, then Scantling is a guy that Rodgers certainly does go to sometimes.
Yeah, I really have nothing more to add on him. His boomer bust is so boom and busty that I don't, I don't like rolling the dice on him. I've done that in years past.
Number 2 is Darnell Mooney, Chicago Bears, wide receiver, 56% owned, and a lot of people have grabbed onto him because he's ended up being the guy with the highest amount of chemistry in the wide receiver corps from the Chicago Bears. Not Allan Robinson, but Mooney is the guy who ends up scoring the points as far as the receivers go. The problem is he is not being particularly efficient with them a lot of the time. Justin Fields is constantly under pressure. The offensive play calling is suspect at best. In Week 11, he caught 5 of 16. That's 5 of 16 targets for 121 yards and a touchdown. So much like Scantling, yes, he did get the targets, but he didn't catch the targets. Some of that was not his fault. Some of that was the fault of Fields and of the play calling in general. But man, that is a really tough pill to swallow. However, Allan Robinson is injured right now. Doesn't look like he's going to suit up for the Thanksgiving game. And if he does miss that game, Mooney is pretty much the only person on that team that Fields throws the ball to, except for Cole Kmet on blood moons.
So do you think that this is going to change with the change in coaching that is supposedly coming?
Well, if it supposedly comes, it's still not going to happen until after this game, right?
Very true.
So,
I think
no.
Darnell Mooney should be owned somewhere. everywhere.
Yeah, but the problem is it's just inconsistency and inability to really grasp a hold of the cheese that he's been offered, you know?
This is the Bears, not the Packers, Dave.
Ah, yes.
Packers
Okay.
were the last team.
So, what do bears eat? The plants? Salmon. The salmon.
They eat salmon and honey.
But yeah, Mooney's not boomer bust. He has put up points in almost every game, but he just doesn't put up a lot of points sometimes, and that's mostly due to the play calling and the poor quarterback play.
I agree. And his catch percentage has been abysmal. 54.7% is not what you want on the guy that you target the most in every game.
Well, we know Andy Dalton can throw the ball, and he is, pretty much the line at which we judge quarterbacks by. So if you like Darnell Mooney at all, then Andy Dalton should be able to get him the ball enough times to make him fantasy relevant this week.
That's an interesting way to put it. You're not wrong in that he's the line we judge quarterbacks, but that line is drawn on the floor. We need to specify.
Yep. Last pickup, and the number one as rated by Jim Hutchins, is that Ty Johnson, New York Jets, 21% owned. Because Michael Carter is going to miss 2 to 3 weeks with an ankle injury, that brings Ty Johnson in to be able to do more work with that team. Now, I don't know how closely you followed the Jets. I actually followed them quite closely in the preseason and first couple games because I was very interested and owned Michael Carter in dynasty leagues and actually picked up Ty Johnson in some of them because Johnson was the guy before Carter was really breaking out this year that was getting a lot of play and a lot of snaps in those games. So with Carter out, I feel like he's going to take over the majority of the fantasy relevant snaps on that team. He may not be the short yardage guy. They may go to somebody else for that. I think they still have P. Ryan, maybe somebody else.
No, P. Ryan is on the Bengals now.
LaMichael?
Oh, no, I'm thinking of Samaje.
Are there 2 P. Ryans out there?
Apparently. Let me pull up the depth chart for these New York football Jets.
But yeah, Ty Johnson should be able to take all the passing downs.
Oh, we got Tevin Coleman. And yes, LaMichael P. Ryan.
Yeah, so I think the short yardage work is going to be sucked up by a lot of other people, but Ty Johnson will get enough to be fantasy relevant. So I appreciate that pick, Jim. I think that's a valuable one. A lot of people have been overlooking Michael Carter, who has been doing really well over the past 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I really liked what I've seen out of Michael Carter. He has been a weekly starter on one of my teams.
Carter, starter. Yeah, there's a lot there that I'm not going to touch. That's true.
All right, fine. Let's do some questions.
Okay, maybe we can trade off. So Josh Lowe 89 asks Devonta Smith, Brandy Ayuk, and Jerry Jeudy. There are 2 flex spots here in a PPR league, so pick 2 of Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk, and Jerry Jeudy.
So I suppose we're sitting one. I'm going to sit Brandon Ayuk.
He had like 24 points last week, and his snap percentage has been, or target share has been floating pretty high, around 20-30% of the 49ers passing offense.
So that's because the 49ers don't pass the ball very much. Because in 2 of the last 5 weeks, he's had 1 and 4 targets. So Ayuk reminds me of a Scantling, kind of. Maybe a Scantling that catches the ball a little more often. But out of those players, I really like Jerry Jeudy. Although I suppose they did just re-up 2 different wide receivers on that team, and for sure, I think you're starting Devonta Smith.
All right, so you go with Smith and Jeudy. This particular week, I think I'll stick with Ayuk and Smith and sit Jeudy. I'm not afraid of Jeudy not getting the targets in the offense there in Denver. I think he's a fixture on the offense. But I think it's just because he's a more recently acquired player from the draft, right? That we shouldn't be scared by other receivers being re-upped.
Yes, I mean, yeah, the contract shouldn't. But I would just think that it would maybe they would turn around and focus on those players a little bit. But I think the story here is we both agree on Devonta Smith, and you could flip a coin between Jeudy and Ayuk in my book.
There you go. What's next?
Oh, yeah. What's next, indeed. So we have to drop one of these players, T. Higgins or Jeff Wilson, help him out. spoiler alert, Jeff Wilson is on the cut list.
Ooh, okay.
So I'm going to go with Jeff Wilson here.
Yeah, I'll drop Jeff Wilson too, but I'll actually drop both of them in a redraft league right now, and just pick up whoever is rising up.
Pick up Ty Johnson.
Yeah, pick up whoever's rising up or waiver wire picks or people that are trending up. I like T. Higgins, right? But there's too many mouths to feed on an offense where Joe Burrow is finding some hiccups in his first really successful year.
Yeah, I agree. Between Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, I don't know. There's not. Tyler Boyd seemed to really settle into the role of the possession receiver there. So yeah, I'm fine with dropping the both.
In redraft, that is. And we have Flip Goalie LAX has need 2 flex in a full point PPR with Terry McLaurin, Mike Williams, AJ Dillon, and Cordell Patterson. And that's tough, especially because Cordell Patterson was coming off of an injury. I like personally AJ Dillon and Terry McLaurin. Dillon filled in well for Aaron Jones. I think we'll see him continue to do well in that offense. The problem there is they have some offensive line woes with recent injuries and injuries from earlier in the year. But A.J. Dillon will get the vast majority of the work as the running back there and in the passing game in the backfield. And Terry McLaurin is just really scary.
That is an interesting way to put it. Scary Terry, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, all in on A.J. Dillon with you there, especially in a full PPR. If Cordell Patterson had been healthy, I'm going with him as number 2 because it's a question mark. I would make a decision on maybe Saturday, based on Patterson practicing all week or not. Scary Terry would definitely be my second play if I wasn't in full confidence of Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, I like Mike Williams too. The dangerous thing with him is that he just had a couple of weeks without any targets, but he has been this year a very successful wide receiver, and it looks like Justin Herbert is now going back to him more, as we saw against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's good news, but we're talking about boom or bust guys. Williams is a guy that could score 20 points or 3. So
you don't have to needlessly talk him up. I've already accepted our trade.
I have Mike Williams in multiple leagues. I have him in my other dynasty league. I have Williams as well. I like Mike Williams.
Evaluate that trade, in fact.
I like Mike Williams.
Okay, so we're going to be starting the following. Is this part of the question that we just saw?
Yeah. This guy was already starting other players.
So then this next question is perfect for me. At E_Ames323 asks or just says, being a fantasy football commissioner is such a thankless job. Cheers, buddy.
So it's interesting. We should have a podcast about this or a topic that comes up about it at some point. But there should be something that people in the league can do to recognize the commissioner and the work that they have to do. Granted, some commissioners probably do less work than others, and a lot of times a well-run.
Some commissioners are downright toxic, I imagine.
Yeah, and a well-run league doesn't always need a lot of interruption. But I think the leagues that are the best are the ones that have a lot of interaction, and the interaction that happens and engagement that happens comes from not only the players but from the commissioner making those things happen. So for those commissioners that are good, they deserve something. Drop them off a dozen donuts or a bottle of donuts or whatever. They'll appreciate it.
Well, but I like this so-called commissioner show that we always talk about doing. It reminds me of Matt Damon not quite making it on every episode of Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, I think that would be a good program. It could be a special episode at some point. Okay. What's cool about that is it's something like that, and listeners and viewers, let me know if I'm wrong, but something like that doesn't need to be time dependent. You could just talk about all the various things that have occurred over the course of being commissioners of leagues and things to avoid and things that you're interested in, and it could be kind of a fun brainstorming session too. So D Mike Media says not a single Seattle running back took more than 18 offensive snaps last game. Zero fantasy football value if that becomes a trend. And like I mentioned earlier, the running back situation in Seattle is kind of similar to what it is in Tennessee, where they had a guy that they knew what he could do and that helped out in wonderful ways, being a vicious runner. I'm talking about Chris Carson. Not as big as Derrick Henry, but he was a straight ahead, knock you on your ass kind of a running back. And without that guy, when you have DJ Dallas and Alex Collins and Rashad Penny and this just group of guys that are unable to put in the necessary effort to go to the next level, then what do you have? You have Russell Wilson, who gets 7 points a game. And we're really seeing how the running backs are super important to some of these offenses that want to run the ball half of the time.
I was going the same path as you in that I was going to also compare them to Tennessee. And we've already determined that the Tennessee backfield is useless. And I would say that the Seattle backfield, if they continue this, is absolutely useless. So at J. Boyanculti says, who would you play this week? Myers in New England or Cooks? Cooks is going to be... So Myers, they're playing Tennessee. Brandon Cooks, Houston is playing... I forget. I'm going to spell Brandon right if I'm going to figure it out. So, Mr. Brandon Cooks, Houston will be playing the Jets. So, this guy's... His season was hit with injuries, but he's climbing up the board. He needs wins to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. What is the advice? I think we said that Cooks isn't going to be the greatest option this week. However, Myers, we haven't even talked about him, I don't think, all year.
Yeah, we brought up Jacoby Myers. I think Jacoby Myers is a great receiver, but what we said about him in the past was that he ends up getting a lot of passes for short yardage and is never the guy getting the touchdowns. And so because of that information, he generally ends up being a flex play or a WR3 in PPR leagues, and not someone who's a really exciting player to talk about.
Definitely not an exciting player to talk about. If this is a full PPR league, I go with Myers. If this is not, then it's kind of a coin flip for me. I might go with Cooks just because he's a much better player and has a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I'm just worried about Cooks not actually doing well now with the current setup of the Texans, but I would agree that Cooks is far and away the guy with the higher upside, so I would probably play him over Myers on a weekly basis, even though last week was kind of a joke for him. So I have a beer we just opened. It's the Day Old Donuts 2021 barrel aged.
My glass here?
Yes, yeah, you got it. Barrel aged in rye whiskey barrels, and this particular one was made in collaboration with Country Donuts. So Scorched Earth in Algonquin, Illinois, and Country Donuts. And they did a great job. It is absolutely beautiful, and we bought a couple of them, so maybe we'll be able to enjoy one with you in person, Jason.
Oh, I can't wait. Soon enough, I'll be let out of quarantine.
So last one here.
Pronounce this guy's name right.
Is Adrian.
That's very nice.
Who should I drop? He says, or she, or they. Both on IR, only have one IR spot and can't hold on to the other anymore. Do I drop Davonte Parker or Chase Edmunds? And
so, is this if it's a dynasty league, then if it's a redraft league, I don't know why you're holding on to Chase Edmunds. I don't think he's going to play this year, or will he? I'll look that up. Davonte Parker is probably the one I would hold on to.
I think they're both gonna come back at some point, but I don't remember what the exact injuries are. I want to say that the Chase Edmunds was a high ankle sprain.
So yeah, it's an ankle. He went out on November 13th is when they placed him on IR. So he'll miss week 10, 11, and 13. He can't come back till week 14. Davonte Parker probably is eligible to come back by this point.
Yeah, so it's tough when you have to make these kinds of decisions, and I guess what we would suggest for the most part would be to keep the guy that can help your team sooner, right, rather than later. And I see that James Conner is developing into this huge focal point of the Arizona offense. It's likely they continue that. He was already getting all the goal line carries, even with Chase Edmunds in, but now he's getting a lot of the short yardage work and some passing game stuff. So when Chase Edmunds gets back, I assume that it'll be more like the relationship that Edmunds had with Kenyan Drake before, where James Conner is still getting the goal line work and some short yardage work and some passing game work, but that Edmunds is getting the majority of the third down work for the Arizona Cardinals. You can't just take a guy that's doing this well for your offense, leading you into victories, and then dismiss him. So
I agree.
I think Edmunds will lose some carries from all of this, and so I say drop Edmunds.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Although I was wrong. Parker is out through the Week 14 bye essentially as well. So
they both are. So you're talking about guys that you can save for the playoffs. Well, then I guess you have to analyze your bench and see what position you're weaker at.
Yep, and if it's a toss-up just between the two and everything else is the same, I guess I would hold on to Parker. Gotcha. Well, Jason, that's a lot of segments. Why don't we run down the cut list real quickly before we close it out for the show? We'll make it quick for all of you who are eager to go refill your drinks. So Justin Fields in Superflex leagues is the only place you're going to have him. You can cut him. He's not even going to be playing next week. Who knows what the hell's going to happen once they fire Nagy. Assuming they fire Nagy, it may not even happen because the Bears have never fired a coach during the season. That being said, he has not been producing at any sort of level that has been acceptable in fantasy football. Mm-hmm. So you can't keep him around. I also think that you should be cutting Derek Carr. Derek Carr has had 3 bad games in a row. Coin flip or not, I don't think that he is necessarily a guy in a single quarterback league that you need to keep around. He is owned in 85% of flea flicker leagues right now. So he's got games against Dallas, Washington, Kansas City, Cleveland. I pumped up that Washington fantasy points against quarterbacks earlier, but then I sort of drilled into it a little bit. A lot of those points were earlier in the year, and they played against Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying too. Is that like lately they've been really good. It's just that Ryan before he was terrible. Yeah, you've got all of the stats that are kind of bloating that number, right? Yeah, so it's not as good as it was. That Atlanta team, that was week 4. That was with Calvin Ridley. That was before that team really fell apart. Yeah. So I think that really you could do better than Derek Carr at this point. At running back, you're going to cut Adrian Peterson. We talked about that earlier. Not playing. I think that you cut Dearness Johnson because Kareem Hunt is coming back, and it's going to be the Chubb Hunt show again. Jeffrey Wilson, you're going to cut. We talked about that earlier as well. I think that you also cut Kenyan Drake in Las Vegas. Look, as far as Drake goes, he has not had a good game in the last few weeks now. He had a good stretch of 3 games there. 20 points, 15 points, 13 points. But what is that, Dave? It's a downward trend. That's right. So even his best games were just a downward trend. And then he had 4 and 3. So that's another team that is just in disarray too. So Kenyan Drake could have big games, but there's no predictor that could tell you that. Well, the coin predicts that they will go 10 and 7. So that's the only predictor we have. And Kenyan Drake is owned in 80% of leagues. So chances are he's on a roster of someone who's listening to us, and they need to be dropped. Alexander Madison, 68% owned in leagues. He has, I don't believe in handcuffs that much, and he is nothing but a handcuff. So the top 3 handcuffs that I've personally had usage of this particular season are Alexander Madison and A.J. Dillon and Chuba Hubbard, all 3 of which have been very useful when they're when the main starters have dipped off because of injury. But yes, it is not a smart thing in a redraft league that doesn't have a huge bench to be able to just
take up those spots with handcuffs, because what that does is it basically just ties up your leverage and gives you a guy that is going to give you nothing unless he's a starter. And we don't need that at all at this point of the season.
Right. Alexander Madison is either getting 25 or more carries, scoring 20 or more points, or he scores less than 5 points in a week. So it's not like a Tony Pollard that you can throw in there on a bye week or something like that.
Yeah.
Going on to wide receiver, Kenny Gallaudet at 77%. We talked about him earlier. I don't know that we necessarily said cut him, but I believe that all the advice and the conclusion we came to earlier is that he should be cut, especially once Sterling Shepard returns. There's just too many players to throw at anyways.
Gallaudet's the highest paid guy there, but he is just not performing at a level that you would expect him to.
Yes, but we're not the ones paying him, so it's okay to cut him.
Yeah, we don't care how much money he's being paid.
Jamal Agnew dislocated his hip, which has to be absurdly painful, and he's going to be out for the rest of the year. So that was a promising-looking wide receiver on the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's cuttable. And I think that this is maybe the most controversial or the hottest take of my cuts this week. But I think Emmanuel Sanders is due for the cut list. He's owned in 81% of leagues. And in the last 4 weeks, he has 0, 8, 6, and 4 points.
Yeah, I don't know that it's that controversial because of the downward trend, but I think you're going to see a lot of people react negatively based on the big games he's had so far this season. Now, it doesn't mean he won't score big points later in the season, but as I've always said, if someone is trending down and you don't really see a reason for that to reverse, then what is the point of keeping that person on your team? How is he helping you? What is he doing for you? He's on one of my leagues, and I already have him going out on a waiver.
Yeah, I mean, we have Stephon Diggs on that team. He has finally figured out how to play football again. So I think that Emmanuel Sanders' days as the WR1 of that team were short-lived, and it was fun while it lasted, but it's not going to happen again.
There you go.
At tight end, Jared Cook is owned in 70% of leagues right now. Look, he's on the Chargers. The Chargers scored 41 points last week, and he had 3 catches for 28 yards. So, and that was like his second best week out of the last 4. So there's just not enough going on there. He's owned in 70% of leagues. That's enough for me to have brought him up and to say cut him. I believe he was on the cut list last week too.
Mm-hmm.
And Evan Ingram owned in 58% of leagues. The Giants' offense is gross. I don't want any part of it. Give me Kadarius Toney or give me death. So yeah, Evan Ingram 2.2 points last week. They chose to throw it to an offensive lineman instead of a tight end. Do you need to know more than that?
Nope. I think that's all we need to know.
Well, right, you want to land the plane, Dave?
Well, cheers to everybody out there again, and
Cheers,
to Scorched Earth Brewery for providing us with some really old donuts that we love. For Jason,
day old. It's not really old. It's just day old.
Well, they're aged though.
You're having
so they're really old donuts.
You're having a hard time differentiating between a couple and a lot, and a day old and more than a day old.
I don't know how long time takes to tick anymore. I have no idea.
Okay, I thought I was the one with the brain damaging disease.
Oh goodness, brain damaging. Oh, be careful with that over there.
That's what I read today. I hate.
Well,
things
maybe you should stop reading things.
I just want to have a test with good news, so I can join you again in person.
You'll be fine, and we'll see you next week, right?
That's the plan.
For the Week 13 preview, where we all talk about our horrible losses or our amazing wins, just approaching the fantasy playoffs.
And how great the Thanksgiving games have gone.
Yeah, how horrible Thanksgiving football
how
was.
The Bears-Lions game made me lose my appetite, and I didn't eat Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh my gosh, it's likely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to everybody listening and watching on YouTube, or the subscribers of the podcast, the people that go to drinkfive.com and consume our content, we really appreciate you, and we hope you
We're
turn.
thankful to you, if you will.
We are thankful. The Turkey Day show, And we hope you'll tune in next week. And for all of our remaining podcasts this season, we have 4 more to go after this one. And we are all looking forward to winning some championships.
Not me.
Drink 5, everybody. Cheers.
Hi, Jess. Oh, she probably can't hear me.